Michelle Malkin, who's just been ahead of the curve on this, immigration, so many other issues, is with us now. Conservative blogger, a syndicated columnist. Michelle, this you're probably, if I guess, with the first moment you saw this, you knew it was fake.
Yeah, had all the telltale signs and flags, Laura, and I have to say, though, after covering hundreds and hundreds of these over the last quarter century, this one really, really takes the cake. And it turns out that Erica Thomas has been essentially fishing for exactly this kind of moment for quite a while now. On her social media Twitter account, she had previously complained about some imagined instance of racism at her local community pool. And it also turns out that she was a huge fan of Jussie Smollett's, which is just the greatest poetry out there. And now, yesterday, she held a press conference where she tried to backtrack off of her backtracking. You couldn't write a skit as delicious as this, Laura.
Yeah, so she's now saying what after the backtrack from Saturday?
So yesterday she said she wanted to make clear that she wasn't backtracking and that, in fact, Eric Sparks had made some sort of comment that echoed President Trump's, even though she had said specifically, as you referenced, that he did not say any specific words about telling her to go back home. Liars lie in the most brazen ways, but hate crime hucksters are the most self-denying people of all, I think. And because their stories, as you mentioned earlier, are so good to be true, it behooves anybody who has a social media account to hesitate before they rush to embrace any kind of hashtag that says, I stand with fill in the blank when it comes to racial issues.
Michelle, these are a couple of the different statements that you referenced that she made. And again, the anatomy of a racial smear coming unwound. This is Erica Thomas on Saturday, I believe. Yes, that's the first one we're going to play when she made her initial backtrack. Let's listen.
He said, go back, those types of words. I don't want to say, he said, go back to your country or go back to where he came from, but he was making those types of references is what I remember.
Is what she should go back to the line. Go back to the line for over 10 items. Okay, so now that's the same as go back to your home country.
Yes, that's right. Go back to another aisle.
And now, Michelle, you have to laugh because it's so pathetic. I think most people are just looking at this going, "You've got is this the game you're really bringing?" Because it's so lame. Like an eighth grader could see through this. Then she does the backtrack of the backtracking.
I want to make sure that everyone knows that in any way am I backtracking on my statement or am I retracting on anything that I said.
Okay, so because then she was made fun of for backtracking, and she says she's not backtracking. So, and this guy, meanwhile, is a Trump-hating Cuban Democrat. First of all, how do they find a Trump-hating Cuban Democrat? That's what I said on my show. I don't know one Trump person, Cuban Democrat who doesn't like Trump. It reminds me of Smollett, though. It reminds me a lot of it with just different fact pattern.
Yes, that's right. The evolution, and then, this is borrowed from the days of the Dan Rather hoax of fake but accurate. Well, he didn't exactly say those words, but I'm going to interpret it that way for maximum political benefit. And all of the people who originally rushed out to support her are either deleting their tweets, like Congressman Liu did, as you mentioned, or they're just going to double down because they're convinced that she was some sort of martyr and victim. But to me, if you look at the video, I mean, she hulks over this little Cuban man. The idea, if you think about when she initially came out with her live stream, when she was blubbering on the video, you'd think that she had been intimidated by someone, who was an MMA fighter.
Giant.
The whole thing is so detached from reality.
Now, but then going back to the larger issue here, which is the Democrats feeding this narrative of racial grievance. So I call it Generation G for grievance. They have grievance about everything. You have a car, they don't. You have a house, they don't. You won't go on vacations, they don't. You didn't build that. I want what you have, and I'm going to come take it. You don't deserve it. Reparations. Now it's the new grievance, not new grievance, but a newly expressed vitriolic racial grievance that's been given a lot of life, Michelle, because of AOC plus 3.
Absolutely. There's a lot of nicknames out there for the squad, and I call them the Congressional Brat Pack. And it is that sense of entitlement, the grievance mongering, the perpetual victimhood status of these women, when they're the people that are in power, they're the people with influence, they're the people at the top of the political hierarchy. And, whether it's talking about the squad or people like Ayanna Pressley in particular, who at the Netroots conference was demanding that anybody who run for political office voice their skin color or voice their identity. If you're not a black voice and representing the black voice, you don't deserve a spot at the table, is what she's saying now. The same thing for Asians or Muslims or queers, as she said. These are the people who've changed the entire dynamic and structure in political life, and yet they continue to moan about their lack of access to power. And with regard to hate crime hoaxes as well, it's not until you have an inflection point of brave enough people saying, this smells, this stinks to high heaven. And it's those brave people who are out there who are willing to call it what it is that were able to expose these things in the first place. And I don't know if it was fate or karma or providence that this man ended up there just as she was giving another interview. But thank goodness for small favors. Well,
and Michelle, number one, it's caught on surveillance video, so she knows that. I probably don't have audio, but they have video. But secondly, the guy is, again, you managed to get into an altercation with a Trump-hating Cuban Democrat. Most things seem not to be falling the Democrats' way lately. I mean, Nancy Pelosi got outmaneuvered with the AOC plus 3 dust up. They totally own her now. It's embarrassing. It's really embarrassing for the Democrat Party. But they just keep stepping in it. And I think it's the frustration that despite everything they've thrown at Trump, and I disagree with some of the stuff Trump has done. This budget is a disaster. Too slow to enforce the immigration laws that are on the books. But, at least they're starting to get their acting gear at the border now, and they're going to start doing expedited removal. But that having been said, with all the junk that's been thrown at him, every allegation, everything. I mean, the fact that the economy has done so well and he doesn't just crack up every day is amazing. I mean, it's really incredible.
It is amazing. And one of the things that makes this president unique as a figure in American politics is that he does not shrivel and wither and fade in the face of being called a racist. And when that hashtag was trending the other day, when the whole squad thing broke out of racist in chief, we know, you and I, Laura, what any other Republican candidate or elected official would have done in the face of all that. And he comes back and doubles down. And I just appreciate that so much after a quarter of a century with dealing with so many of these hate crime hucksters. And, after seeing so many people in establishment Washington in the swamp capitulate to those forces. The one thing I want to say about the hate crime hoaxes as well, too, is, you went to Dartmouth, I went to Oberlin. They're twin sides of the same coin. And we saw all of the identity politics and multiculturalism fester in the late 80s and early 1990s. And I went back to Oberlin 16 years ago and gave a speech on hate crime hoaxes. And what I said then definitely holds now, which is that these liberals see racism where it doesn't exist. They fabricate it where they can't find it, and they ignore it within their own ranks. And that is essentially the state of the Democratic Party today.
I agree. And again, I think one of the many reasons that Trump has enduring strength as a political figure doesn't just come from his office, but it comes from the fact, Michelle, that he says what so many Americans want to say. Like, I call you on your BS. You're the racist. You see everything through a racial prism. I'm not a racist, and you're a total fraud. Everybody's been so cowed. No one wants to speak the truth. They're afraid of losing their job, not getting a promotion, not getting into college, getting in trouble, in the military. Everyone's afraid. And he says, you know something? You don't have to be afraid anymore. You have just as much right to speak out and call them on their stuff as they do to try to call you on your stuff. And I think that's refreshing to a lot of people.
It's liberating. It's a relief that there's somebody in elected office, and thank God the highest one in the land, who does speak our same language. And, the bottom line, of course, is that what he's talking about is that we should have people who have sworn an oath of office who put America first, and who don't see that phrase and those principles as some sort of white supremacist dog whistle. I mean, we hear it all the time. I mean, you look at the onslaught that you and I face all the time and have for, upwards of 3 decades now, of being accused of being a racist or a xenophobe, of being heartless. I mean, we're both mothers of children of color, but that's not enough. I am of color, and I still get called a white supremacist every single day. And to be able to brush it off is the most liberating thing of all, and I'm glad that our president feels the same way about it.
No, I agree. I love that when they try to do that to you, Michelle. The best, and that cracks me up. That just totally cracks me up. And then the same thing with me, like, you're a racist, you're a white supremacist. I said, really? How much work have you done down in Central America, my friend? I mean, tell me. Let's talk about all your volunteer and all the communities you've helped rejuvenate and all the help you've given these orphans. Let's hear about it. I want to hear about all the work you've done. I just call them right. And they're such frauds that none of it bothers me. It really doesn't. It just But I think everyone on our side has to stick together because Lord knows they're sticking together. So we have to do the same thing for each other.
That's absolutely right. I mean, this penchant for throwing people under the bus. At the first whiff of an attack from the coordinated left in the media. And we saw this especially, too, with the Antifa thugs. I mean, they are out for blood. They smell blood. And it does require us to stick together more than we ever have before.
Now,
sure.
we're talking to Michelle Malkin here on the Laura Ingraham podcast. Michelle, I know you will scream when you hear this if you already haven't. Cory Booker, whose campaign is down in low single digits, is trying desperately to have another Spartacus moment, like the one he had in the Kavanaugh hearings. So this was Cory last night on, on Seth Meyers' show. Let's listen.
Donald Trump is a guy who, you understand, he hurts you, and my testosterone sometimes makes me want to feel like punching him, and which would be bad for this elderly, out of shape man that he is if I did that. This physically weak specimen.
I've never heard a man talk about testosterone before. Like, this is an odd phrasing. It's like, it sounds very insecure.
I wonder which focus group tested that.
Yeah.
It also reminds me, of course, that Cory Booker, besides the Spartacus moment, is most famous for inventing a composite inner city friend called T-Bone. So I think that T-Bone is now his political strategist, and this is his ploy to take the masculinity award among the Democratic candidates.
But they're all going to fall away fairly soon. I mean, they can't really keep up this act much longer. So you see this playing out, Michelle. What do you see? I mean, the kind of last gaggle standing. Who will it be?
Well, I know a lot of people laugh when we hear warnings about Elizabeth Warren sort of mopping the floor with all of these people. But I think she should be taken seriously, even after all of the Pocahontas debacle. This woman is organized, and this is what she's wanted her entire life. And if that happens, then I think we're looking at another 4 years for Donald Trump to finish what he started.
Yeah, I don't think Grandma Warren Pocahontas is going to. I mean, all you need to do is just replay that 23andMe phone call with the. All you need to do is play that on a continual loop, and that's just not going to end well. I don't see that men are turned off by her, I think, and she's kind of that way. Donald Trump he's a racist, by golly, and my pawpaw said that. You know, if my cheekbones got any higher, they'd be as tall as the Empire State Building.
I've never heard your Warren impression. It is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at that. I've worked on that over time. You know, that's
got the voice down.
That's my next line of work. You know, that's my next line of work. Michelle, before we let you go, we wouldn't be an appearance with you if we didn't talk about what's happening on immigration. The push to decriminalize border crossings in the Democrat Party, again, moving ever farther to the left on that issue. Where do we stand?
Well, belatedly, the Trump administration is taking steps to do more to turn away people at the border. This is really what needs to happen. You know, I've long advocated that we build more detention bed space. I mean, back in 2002, we only had 2,000 beds, and I said that we need to quadruple or quintuple that. But I think, the ultimate solution here is not to let them in, give them room and board, and then let them go, and then try to chase them afterwards to, the hysteria of the open borders crowd, but to prevent them from getting in the first place. And it is systemic because we've got the problem at the border, and then we've got this issue with refugee resettlement of, anti-American grievance mongers and jihad coddlers like Ilhan Omar. And so the proposal this week to freeze refugee resettlements and bring down the number to zero is something that I've advocated for a long time as well. We need a moratorium to absorb the people we already have here, to chase down the people who are criminal aliens and deport them and make sure they don't come back, and to provide us breathing room to do the job that we're supposed to do when we bring people into the country, which is assimilate them.
100%, and instead we have our Border Patrol rescuing people out of the Rio Grande because we're never going to watch someone, drown. And then we have to process them in when the law currently as stated allows us to quickly repatriate them. I mean, Dan Horowitz has been doing the greatest writing on this, saying the current law allows us to repatriate people very quickly, and we're not doing it. So I hope that we're going to begin to do expedited removal of folks. But just for fun, this is Joe Scarborough to end this interview. Let's listen.
I remember back 2005, 2006, when stories broke about how the United States and our allies were treating terrorists, suspected terrorists that we captured. And we are now doing that to 5, 6, 7-year-old children, 10-year-old children who, let me say again, for the ignorant, are coming here, many of them with their parents legally, to seek refugee status. That is not illegal. That is a legal action.
So that's the new word. They're legally here. They're all legitimate claims.
There's so much BS packed in there. Let me just say that, first of all, we spend billions. This is taxpayer-subsidized money through the Health and Human Services Department as well as the State Department to house thousands and thousands of people who come here falsely claiming asylum and then are, as we've long talked about, caught and released. And those billions of dollars go into foster care, diapers, yoga classes. People have no idea. And so that propaganda really needs to be pushed back against. As for legal asylum claims, you're supposed to do it legally in your home country at first, and that has been hijacked by the American Immigration Lawyers Association and then repeated falsely by open borders tools like Joe Scarborough.
Michelle Malkin, you're just so fantastic. We love having you on.